Blessed are those servants the master finds vigilant on his arrival. They are waiting with expectation. There is a long tradition in the scriptures about being vigilant, about watching, being ready to accept the will of God when finally it comes. So we're called to watch, to be observant, to don't let anything go by because you just might miss God's presence. So this vigilance is not just sitting there doing nothing, playing cards until something else happens. It's not passive. You're looking out and you're actually doing something. Jesus refers to the person who is vigilant as a servant. That person is ready to serve, ready to do something, ready to accept the will of God when at last it comes. In the Old Testament, the Jewish people were vigilant at all times. They were watching, waiting with expectation for God's liberation for themselves. Will this be the day of deliverance? So many times they were disappointed, and yet they still kept watch. And then in the New Testament, the apostles are in the upper room, wondering what to do after Jesus is crucified, died, and then rises from the dead. They're waiting, they're watching for some sign that everything will be well. And what happens? The Holy Spirit comes to them, inspires them, and they are able to break out of the locked doors and go into the streets. And everyone who heard their preaching was able to understand them. And they were united as one group. Pretty amazing stuff happens when we are vigilant. And so we also in our own time are called to be vigilant, waiting for God's power to come for us. In that second reading, Abraham was vigilant. He watched. And then one day, 3 heavenly strangers came for a visit. And at the end of their visit, they told him, Abraham, the next time we come here, next year, you will have a son. And Abraham laughs, and his wife laughs, because they were way too old to have any children. But sure enough, because they were vigilant, because they were waiting and watching for God's presence to come to them, they were rewarded. Also, too, in his vigilance, Abraham finds a test. God is giving Abraham a test to sacrifice this son. Obviously, this is years later when Isaac is born. And Abraham, you will go to a place that I find and you will give up your son. But at the last minute, Isaac is spared. Even in the most difficult times of life, Abraham is watching for the will of God, hoping for an intervention so that his son will live, and sure enough, that happens. And so in the midst of all of the difficulties of life, we know that we are tested. So when we're vigilant, there's a lot of great stuff that comes to us, and also some pretty awful stuff that comes to us. There are tests that come all the time. I was thinking about that and the Mass we had a couple of weeks ago. We had a Mass for peace because of all of the crazy stuff that's happening around us. Maybe this is our test, just like Abraham was tested so long ago, and we have to hold a vigil for deliverance from the difficulty that we are sharing this time. Can we be faithful when it seems that faith is failing us? Are we confident that God can and will heal us when things around us seem so broken? Be vigilant. Watch for God's movement, and we won't be disappointed. God's movement is always there, and God's movement is fierce. Though sometimes God's movement might not move the same way we would want it to. But first of all, I have a couple of stories for you. There's a priest of this archdiocese who just a couple of weeks ago was supposed to undergo surgery. And he had his parish praying for him. We prayed for him here at Church of the Holy Spirit. And they take him in for his pre-operation screening or whatever they do. He is completely cured, which is amazing. And he says this is God's work. The doctor didn't feel that way, being cheated out of his fee. But this is an amazing thing, and he feels that he was really cured, and his doctors can't explain why his situation changed so amazingly. There was a lady I met one time who was diagnosed with stage 3 brain cancer, and she went in for a screening in a few days, and then it was all gone, and the doctors can't figure out why. And then two friends of my sister Nancy, two friends of my sister had a very sick young daughter, and she was hospitalized for a long, long time. They were driving home one night, and they had a vision. And they told this to Nancy, and Nancy told this to me. And they saw Jesus, who told them that everything would be all right. Now, it's kind of amazing because they're Jewish. But they said they both agreed that yes, this was Jesus. They're still Jewish, but anyway, that's another thing. But their daughter is perfectly healed now, which is an amazing, amazing thing. Sometimes when we are vigilant, things do turn out well. God's movement is clear among his people. Sometimes, though, things don't exactly go our way, and people aren't cured like we would want them to be, and we just can't fathom why that happens. But be vigilant, be aware, be ready for God's presence, even if it's very small, in all things of life, even in the hurts that we might have. The first reading highlights hope and courage in the midst of struggle, and that always sustains us. It's so easy to lose hope because sometimes things are so overwhelming. But be vigilant. Watch with faithful eyes for the presence of God. Wait with expectation for the blessings that God has in store for us. Look sharp for God's presence in all situations, even the ones where it seems God has fled the scene a long time ago. Be hope-filled, be joyful, because as Jesus says in the first line of today's gospel, do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father is pleased to give you the kingdom.